Elon Musk had conquered space, reshaped industries, and pushed the boundaries of human innovation. But no one could have predicted that in a live interview with Pope Francis, the visionary entrepreneur would make the most unexpected decision of his life, a decision that would send shockwaves across the world. The studio was electric with anticipation. The interview between Pope Francis and Elon Musk had been hyped for weeks, a meeting of two minds from opposite realms, one representing the spiritual foundation of billions, the other a titan of science and progress. The tension in the air was palpable, not from animosity, but from the sheer weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. Elon Musk, ever the enigma, had agreed to this discussion with an unusual openness. While he had spoken about religion in passing before, often with a detached curiosity, this was different. His usual demeanor, calculated, confident, sometimes aloof, carried a subtle but noticeable shift. Something weighed on him. His eyes, sharp and inquisitive as ever, hinted at an inner turmoil. Pope Francis, seated across from him, radiated his characteristic warmth and humility. The contrast between them was striking, the spiritual shepherd of millions and the architect of humanity's interplanetary future. But as the conversation began, it became clear that their dialogue was not one of conflict, but of exploration. The discussion moved through expected territories: the moral implications of artificial intelligence, the responsibility of power, the role of faith in an age dominated by science. Musk spoke of humanity's future among the stars, of colonizing Mars, of the endless pursuit of knowledge. The Pope listened, nodding, occasionally offering reflections that reframed the conversation not as a pursuit outward into the cosmos, but inward, toward the soul. Then, the interview took a turn. The question was simple, yet it landed like a meteor, one that no one, not even Musk, seemed fully prepared for. It was not a challenge, nor an argument, but a deeply human inquiry that cut through the intellectual barriers he so often used as shields. The room fell into silence. Something inside Musk shifted. He hesitated, a rare sight for a man who spoke with the confidence of one who had mastered the complexities of existence. For the first time in a long time, perhaps ever, he did not have an answer. He exhaled, his shoulders dropping slightly as though an unseen weight had just been recognized. He spoke then, not as the billionaire engineer nor the industry disruptor, but as a man searching for meaning beyond algorithms and equations, beyond rockets and revenue models. He spoke of how, despite all his accomplishments, an emptiness had followed him. Science had given him answers, but not peace. It had mapped the universe, but not the soul. The audience, watching from all corners of the world, was captivated. This was not the Elon Musk they had seen on conference stages or in boardrooms. This was a man in transition, standing at the crossroads of intellect and faith. Then, in a moment that would be replayed and dissected endlessly in the coming days, he made the decision that no one expected. Right there, on live television, Musk announced his intent to be baptized by Pope Francis. The declaration sent an immediate shockwave through the world, the weight of it settling in as the Pope, unwavering, responded with a quiet but resolute acceptance. Gasps rippled through the audience. Social media exploded. Analysts scrambled to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Was this a publicity stunt, a deeply personal awakening? Speculation ran rampant, but the truth was unfolding in real time, raw and unfiltered. Musk, however, seemed unbothered by the chaos his words had unleashed. If anything, he looked lighter, as though he had finally made peace with a question that had long haunted him. His expression was unreadable, yet profound, a man who had just stepped onto a path he never expected to walk. The interview, once an intellectual exercise, had become something far greater. It had become a moment of transformation, one that neither Musk nor the world would ever forget, and it was only the beginning. The world was still reeling from the announcement. News outlets scrambled to analyze what had just unfolded. Socials, media erupted into a frenzy of speculation, and countless think pieces attempted to decipher Musk's decision. But as the storm raged outside, within the grand halls of St. Peter's Basilica, a different kind of tension brewed, one far more intimate, far more personal. Elon Musk had made his choice, but now he had to follow through. As he stepped into the Vatican, the weight of history pressed down on him. The towering columns, the intricate frescoes, the sheer enormity of the space. It all seemed to amplify the significance of what was about to take place. It was a setting that stood in stark contrast to the world he had built for himself. Musk had spent decades engineering the future, constructing visions of tomorrow that transcended borders and planets. But here, in this sacred place, time did not move forward. It stood still. He was no longer the disruptor, the visionary, the tech mogul. He was just a man about to take a step that no algorithm could predict, no financial model could justify. The room was quiet, save for the hushed murmurs of a small congregation of witnesses, close aides, members of the clergy, and a few reporters, permitted to document the historic event. Pope Francis stood before him, his expression calm yet searching, as if he too was trying to understand this unlikely turn of fate. Musk could feel the weight of their eyes, the silent questions that hovered in the air. Was this genuine? Was this another unpredictable maneuver from a man known for disrupting industries, only now turning his gaze toward the oldest institution in the world? Even Musk himself wasn't entirely sure. Doubt gnawed at him. He had always prided himself on rationality, on being led by logic and evidence. And yet, here he was, on the cusp of something profoundly irrational, something that could not be quantified or measured. Pope Francis, sensing his hesitation, spoke, not with judgment, not with persuasion, but with a quiet assurance that cut through the noise of Musk's own mind. It was not a sermon, not an argument, but a simple truth. Faith was not the absence of logic. It was the presence of something greater, something that could not be engineered or coded into existence. Musk swallowed hard. There was no turning back now. As he stepped forward, his mind raced. Images flashed, his past triumphs, his struggles, the moments of loneliness that even success could not quiet. He thought of the countless nights spent in restless pursuit, of something more, something that always seemed just beyond his grasp. He thought of the losses that had shaped him, the questions that had haunted him. Then the water touched his forehead. The sensation was startling, not because of its physical presence, but because of what it represented. It was not the water itself that carried weight, but the meaning behind it, the symbolism of transformation. For the first time in his life, Musk felt something shift, not in the external world, not in the technological landscapes he had spent, his life constructing, but within himself. He had always believed in humanity's power to forge its own destiny, to build its own future. But now, for the first time, he allowed himself to consider something else. The possibility that not all things were meant to be conquered or controlled. Some things were meant to be surrendered to. The baptism was over in moments, but the silence that followed stretched for what felt like an eternity. The cameras had captured everything. The world had watched it happen in real time, and now the aftermath was inevitable. Musk straightened, his face unreadable. He turned to address those who had gathered, but before he could speak, the questions began. Why? The word cut through the air like a blade. It was not asked with malice, but with urgency. People wanted to understand. Had he experienced some revelation? Had he always believed secretly despite his public persona? Was this the influence of a personal tragedy, an attempt to fill an unseen void? Musk took a breath. He did not offer grand proclamations. he did not declare himself changed beyond recognition. Instead, he spoke simply, candidly. He spoke of his ongoing search for truth, of the limits of science, of the realization that progress and faith were not opposing forces, but parallel paths leading to the same horizon. He did not claim to have all the answers, but for the first time in his life, he was at peace with that uncertainty. The response was immediate and divided. Some heralded the moment as historic, a merging of two seemingly incompatible worlds. Others scoffed, dismissing it as nothing. More than a publicity stunt, another unpredictable twist in Musk's ever-evolving narrative. The backlash was swift. Critics accused him of using religion as a marketing tool, of leveraging faith for personal gain. Supporters, on the other hand, saw it as a genuine transformation, an evolution of a man who had already reshaped so much of the world around him. Perhaps now he was reshaping himself. But for Musk, the noise did not matter. As he left the Vatican that night, stepping into the cool air, he was struck by a thought he had never entertained before. For all his achievements, for all the ways he had sought to push humanity forward, perhaps the greatest frontier he had yet to explore was not space, not artificial intelligence, not the mechanics of the universe itself, but the unseen depths of the human spirit. And as he walked away from the sacred halls, the world watching, dissecting, questioning, he knew his journey was far from over. It had only just begun. The moment had already been immortalized, dissected by every news outlet, debated by philosophers, scrutinized by skeptics. Yet, as Elon Musk returned to the world outside the Vatican, he realized that the baptism was not an ending. It was merely the catalyst for a storm that had yet to fully erupt. The backlash came in waves, relentless and unforgiving. The business world reeled from the news. Tesla and SpaceX stock wavered as investors speculated on what this meant for Musk's leadership, his judgment, his priorities. His decision had disrupted more than just public opinion. It had unsettled those who had built their fortunes and futures on his unwavering rationality, his commitment to pushing humanity forward through science and technology. And then, there were his fiercest critics. The scientific community, one that had long celebrated Musk's groundbreaking contributions, was suddenly divided. Some questioned whether he had abandoned reason for faith, whether the man who had once declared humanity's future was among the stars had now fallen into ancient superstition. Others, though, saw it differently. Could faith and science coexist? Could Musk's journey signal something more profound? A bridge between two seemingly irreconcilable worlds? Within hours of the baptism, prominent figures took to social media, to interviews, to op-eds, each offering their own interpretation of what had transpired. Some religious leaders welcomed Musk's conversion as a victory, proof that even the greatest minds could find truth in faith. Others remained wary. Was his baptism an act of sincere belief, or was there something else at play? Musk himself remained silent in the immediate aftermath. He did not fire back at his critics, nor did he revel in the support of those who now saw him as a figure of spiritual transformation. Instead, he retreated, withdrawing from public view, as though he himself was still processing what had happened. But our silence in a world that thrives on controversy only fueled the fire. Within days, rumors spread. Was there a deeper reason behind Musk's decision? The whispers grew louder, theories taking shape in the shadows. Some suggested a personal loss had driven him toward faith. That grief had led him down a path he had never previously considered. Others speculated that his decision was calculated, a long-term strategy to reshape his image, to forge a new kind of influence that extended beyond technology and into something even greater. Then the first leaks surfaced. An anonymous source close to Musk revealed that, in the months leading up to the baptism, he had been unusually reflective, more withdrawn than usual. He had been asking questions, deep existential questions, ones that seemed to suggest he had been wrestling with something far greater than public perception or corporate strategy. And then there was the personal loss. It was revealed that, just weeks before the interview with Pope Francis, Musk had suffered a deeply private tragedy. The details were scarce, deliberately kept from the public eye, but those who knew him best saw the change. The man who had spent his life relentlessly chasing the next frontier had suddenly paused, forced to confront something that no amount of innovation or intelligence could control. The revelation sent the media into a frenzy. Was this the missing piece? Had Musk's decision been less about belief and more about coping with grief? Had he turned to faith not out of conviction but out of necessity? The speculation reached a fever pitch. Public opinion, already volatile, split even further. Some accused the world of being too cynical, unwilling to accept that a man, even a man of science, could find genuine solace in faith. Others saw the entire saga as an unraveling, a sign that Musk was losing his grip on reality. But the most unexpected confrontation came not from the public, not from investors or journalists, but from those closest to him. Within his inner circle, a quiet but fierce debate had ignited. Some of his closest allies, the minds who had helped him build his empire, worried that his newfound faith would alter his course. Musk had always been a force of reason, of progress, of defying the limits imposed by human history and tradition. But now, was he becoming something else? Would this transformation shift his priorities, divert his focus away from the audacious goals they had worked so hard to achieve? The conversations were intense, some even turning into outright arguments. Musk, uncharacteristically, did not fight back with his usual sharp wit or dismissive confidence. He listened. He absorbed the doubts, the fears, the concerns, and in that he saw something he had never fully considered before. Faith, for all its beauty, for all its power, was also disruptive. It had shaken him to his core, forced him to question everything he had once held as absolute. And now it was shaking the very foundation of the empire he had built. The pressure mounted. Calls poured in from executives, from investors, from those who had once been his most loyal supporters. They needed to know, was this a momentary phase, or had something fundamental changed within him? And finally, after days of silence, Musk reemerged. In a live address streamed to millions, he spoke, not to defend himself, not to convert others, but to explain. He did not renounce science. He did not abandon progress. He did not claim to have all the answers. Instead, he spoke of balance. For too long, humanity had placed science and faith at odds, as though they could not coexist. But what if they could? What if technology and spirituality were not enemies, but partners in the same quest for truth? He acknowledged his grief, the losses that had shaped him, the uncertainty that had driven him to seek something beyond the material. He did not claim his baptism had provided him with all the answers, only that it had opened a door, one he had long refused to acknowledge, and then, with a calm that silenced even his harshest critics, he posed a question to the world. What if the future of humanity did not rest solely in reaching the stars, but in understanding what it meant to be human in the first place? The address ended. The world for a moment paused. The debate was far from over. The tensions had not eased, but something had changed, because for the first time, people were no longer just arguing about Musk's decision. They were asking the questions he had asked himself, and that, perhaps, was the most disruptive thing of all. The world had been shaken. The image of Elon Musk, billionaire, engineer, disruptor, kneeling in baptism under the hands of Pope Francis, had burned itself into history. It had fractured public perception, ignited ideological battles, and forced an age-old conversation into the modern world. Could faith and science coexist? But now, the frenzy was beginning to settle. The headlines shifted from outrage to analysis, from speculation to reflection. People were no longer just debating Musk's decision. They were debating the very nature of belief, of purpose, of the human search for meaning. And while the world wrestled with these questions, Musk himself was left to navigate the aftermath of his transformation. It had changed him, though not in the way many had assumed. He was still the same man who sought to push humanity beyond Earth, who saw the universe as an endless frontier waiting to be explored. He still believed in the power of science, in logic, in reason, but for the first time, he allowed himself to believe in something more, not in opposition to progress, but in harmony with it. As he returned to his work, Musk faced an undeniable challenge. His empire was uneasy. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, a boring company, each had been built on the foundation of his vision, his certainty, his relentless pursuit of the future. But now, many within those walls questioned whether he was still the same leader. Investors whispered of distractions. Engineers worried about shifting priorities. Some feared he was losing his edge. Musk, however, had never been one to be derailed by doubt. In his first major public appearance after his baptism, he stood before thousands at a SpaceX event, the same stage where he had once spoken about colonizing Mars and AI advancements. But this time, his speech carried a different weight. He did not avoid the subject of his faith. He addressed it head-on. With characteristic bluntness, he acknowledged the concerns, the skepticism. He knew people feared that he had changed too much, that his newfound beliefs would somehow hinder the relentless innovation that had defined his career. But then he posed a question that silenced the crowd. Why should progress be limited to what we can build? It was a simple challenge, but one that struck at the heart of the debate. Humanity had always pursued advancement, technology, medicine, artificial intelligence. But what if true advancement wasn't just about reaching new planets, but about understanding ourselves? What if science could push forward not in defiance of belief, but alongside it? The audience was captivated. For decades, the world had drawn lines, faith on one side, science on the other. But now the man who had embodied technological progress was stepping over that line, erasing it, and, in that moment, the shift became undeniable. Musk's influence was unparalleled. He was not just a CEO or an inventor. He was a cultural force, someone who shaped how people thought about the future. And now, whether the world agreed with him or not, he was forcing them to reconsider the idea that faith had no place in that future. The controversy did not fade overnight. It would take years for the world to fully grasp what had happened, for his journey to be understood not as a moment of weakness, but as an evolution of thought. But Musk did not slow down. SpaceX continued its mission to Mars. Tesla pushed forward with AI-driven advancements. Neuralink made breakthroughs in bridging the human mind with technology. But now, woven into those ambitions was a deeper question, one that Musk himself had never dared to ask before. What if the greatest frontier was not just the stars, but the human soul? The years that followed saw Musk's philosophy evolve. He did not become a preacher, nor did he abandon his scientific pursuits. Instead, he became something new, a man who had embraced both the tangible and the intangible, who saw faith not as a limitation, but as an expansion of perspective, and with that evolution, his legacy transformed. The final chapter of his story was not written in financial reports or engineering blueprints, but in the minds of those he had inspired. A generation of thinkers, scientists, and spiritual seekers emerged, refusing to accept the idea that they had to choose between logic and belief. And in that, Musk had accomplished something even he had never predicted, not just technological disruption, but the disruption of thought itself. As he stood one evening, watching the latest SpaceX shuttle ascend into the vast unknown, he felt something he had never felt before. Not just awe for the universe, not just excitement for what lay beyond, but peace, because for the first time, Elon Musk understood that the greatest journey was not one measured in light years or algorithms. It was the journey to understanding what it meant to be truly human, and that journey, he knew, was infinite.